Well, shalom, everyone, and welcome to our Shabbat Shalom service. It is August 18th, 2023, and we are excited about everything that Jehovah is doing in the lives of his people, especially those that are part of this study group, as we come together twice a week, every weekend we come together and we study the word together, studying to show ourselves approved, workers not ashamed of our hire, rightly dividing the word of truth. We are playing this music now because we are in lesson 45. By etchanon in Hebrew, which means I pleaded. And in Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 23, all the way to chapter 7, verse 11. So we got a lot to get through on tonight. So much. But we want to continue to go line upon line and precept upon precept so that we get this full value of this word as we study on tonight. So once again, shalom to our servants. Thank you so much for joining us. We are listening to this music, getting our hearts and minds ready to receive all that the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, will minister to us through this word on tonight. Since it is very close to the Sabbath in terms of sundown, we have lit the menorah, symbolic of the word, the light that brings us out of dark places. For Yeshua said his words are spirit and they are life. And our spirits need to be nourished so they can keep this flesh under subjection and guide us on this journey of sanctification and to fulfill all that we were destined to fulfill. So again, let's listen to the music and let it minister to our hearts. We're going to give it a couple of minutes because we can't afford to wait too long. We got a lot to cover on tonight, and we want to try to get through in 1 hour. Get your communion elements together, for we will be participating in what Yeshua HaMashiach told his disciples on the night before his death concerning this ceremonial practice. Man, do it all always. Remember. To be wrapped in the arms of the Ruach HaKodesh, as we yield these earthen vessels to be filled all the more with your presence. So he's going to sanctify us. That process is a day-by-day walk. We have to pick up that cross and follow it. Right, we have to end it there because we have to get into this lesson on tonight. And so with that, let me shut off my device so I don't get any phone calls. And I'm trying to do that, but it ain't cooperating. Let's see. There we go. Right. All right. We're going to pray and then we're going to get our communion elements together. We are going to participate in the ceremonial part of our service that Yeshua told us to do and do it often. We're going to do that and then we'll get into this word on tonight. So let us pray. Jehovah, our Elohim, creator of all things, we thank you for this is the day that you have made. We rejoice. We are glad in it. We thank you for this opportunity to participate on social media where we can study together your word. For your word is a lamp unto my feet as it lights our path. We thank you for the Ruach HaKodesh, your Holy Spirit that comes to guide us into all truth, opening our hearts and mind to receive all that you will speak to us through this word on tonight. And in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, we pray this prayer. Amen. All right, so we are excited. We're going to get ready to take communion. And make sure that as you join us, you mute yourself so that we don't get any feedback. So let's get our communion elements together. We're going to start off with blessing over the bread. In this case, for mine, it's going to be a matzah cracker, but it could be bread. And in Hebrew, it is Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech ha'alam hamotzi lehem min haaretz. Blessed are you, Jehovah, our Elohim, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. And Yeshua took this bread and he blessed the Father for it. Then he passed it around. He said, take this bread and eat. For this bread is symbolic of my body that is broken just for you. Do this often and always in remembrance of me. And so they ate. Then he took the cup of wine, we say the cup of redemption for. He blessed the Father for the wine. Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech ha'alam bori pari hagafen. Blessed are you, Jehovah, our Elohim, King of the universe, who brings forth, who creates the fruit of the vine. Then he told them to drink. He said, take and drink, for this is symbolic of my blood that is shed for the remission of your sin and for a renewed relationship with me. Do this often, always in remembrance of me. And so they drank. All right. That is it. Just understand that Yeshua HaMashiach said that for a reason. And when we are obedient, blessings will flow. Paul talked later on in one of the letters concerning the fact that some were not doing well because they were not doing what they had been told. So there's the sins of, excuse me, the wine always does that. There's the sin of commission that you commit, and then there's the sin of omission, things that you omit. And so we shouldn't have to wait once a month or whenever we feel like we're holy in order to do it. Yeshua said you could do it any time that you're gathering together in his name. So you could feel free to do it in the morning before meal or whatever. Feel free to participate in something that Yeshua said we would be blessed. So with that, we're going to get into our shared screen. As we are in the shared screen, we're going to get to the slideshow. And we can see that our lesson tonight is etchanon, etchanon. And it means I pleaded. We're going to learn a little bit about that I pleaded aspect of what Moshe is saying as he is ministering to the people before he goes up in a high place and he won't come down. He has already anointed Yahshua and prepared him for leadership, for he knows his time is fastly approaching. So once he gets through, he's going to, the whole book that we call Devarim or Deuteronomy is Moses' final words to the children of Israel before he departs. And so we take these things to heart and we learn that there's so much in here that he tries to condense 40 years in a couple of days. And so we want to listen to what the Ruach HaKodesh will speak to us as we go through these words of Moshe in our lesson on tonight, etchanon. Once again, every time there is this is like a topic word. Etchanon, we'll see it used in our lesson on tonight. But it'll run throughout the whole almost 4 chapters that we're going to study, and that's why we need to get started. So we're in Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 23 is where we'll pick up, and we'll go all the way to chapter 7, verse 11. Excuse me. This is lesson 45 of 52 lessons that'll get us through the first 5 books of the Bible called the Torah, or Jehovah's instructions, in 1 year. And so we'll get into our introduction. I'm going to see if my little pointer is going to work here. I'm learning how to use this thing and kind of keep everybody in the same place. As Moses is continuing his review of the instruction that Jehovah had given to him to give to the children of Israel. Moses gives these instructions with great passion because he will not be the people into the land of Canaan. Moses wants to give all his knowledge and wisdom to his people as he departs, as any father would try to give as much to his sons and daughters and those left behind as he can before he departs. Each of us has the ability to free ourselves from our current level and reach higher plateaus. And how do we do that? By studying the word. We are to free ourselves from the constraints that this world system has placed upon us. If you are not growing, then you are not free. Ask yourself, how can I improve myself? Well, you improve yourself by studying the word. Ask, how can I get closer to Jehovah? Spend time with him. Spend time in the word, spend time in prayer, praise and worship. By spending time, you build relationship. And in our quest to get closer to Jehovah, then we become free. So the more we utilize the power of the Ruach HaKodesh in our lives, the more we understand what it is to be free. For whoever Yeshua sets free is free indeed. And so we have this power, and we want to understand what that power is and use it. Then we go on to see the Hebrew word translated pleaded, which is etchanon, has a meaning in which Moses is basically asking for grace. Moses will then state that grace is an attribute of Jehovah. So after Moses says this, then he's going to ask Jehovah to utilize that attribute, or in other words, he's going to praise Jehovah for who he is. Moses uses this concept many times, used it when he was interceding for the people of Israel. And in verse 26, as we begin continue chapter 3, Moses says that his actions were done in front of all the people. And for this reason, he was not allowed to receive the grace of Jehovah. So it wasn't in his private time of prayer. He was carrying out a function that Jehovah had commissioned him to do. And in doing that in front of all the people, he did not represent Jehovah properly. This is the thought that some commentaries, and it is the concept I like most because it makes more sense to me, that when he said, I pleaded, and then followed it up with talking about the attributes, then basically what he was asking for is grace. I messed up. But you're a great God. You forgive us. So in this matter, forgive me. He's repenting and turning from it, but it did not happen. Jehovah says no. Also, Moses knew that they had conquered the land that they were presently occupying. So on this side, even though they were on the east side of the Jordan, they owned that land. They had taken that land. And so therefore, as far as Moses could have been thinking, basically they were already in the land. Why? Because they had conquered this land. And therefore, perhaps Jehovah would relent because he was allowing him on this side of the Jordan to still lead. But Jehovah said no. We learn in this lesson that people are Jehovah's inheritance. The people of Israel were Jehovah's inheritance. And the land was the inheritance of the people that Jehovah had promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So with that, let's see if we can get into our lesson. Yeah. Verse 23 of chapter 3. And it reads, Then I pleaded. Well, that's that word, etchanon, with Jehovah. Jehovah Elohim, you have begun to reveal your greatness to your servant and your strong hand. For what other God is there in heaven or on earth that can do the works and mighty deeds that you do? So you can see that he's praising Jehovah because he's pleading with him to allow him to go in and take the people into the land. He says, please let me go across and see the good land on the other side of the Jordan, that wonderful hill country and the Lebanon. He's 26, but Jehovah was angry with me on account of you. There's many meanings for on account of you, but mostly because of what I believe is being said by Moshe. I think he's basically saying, because I did this act in front of you and he didn't listen to me. Jehovah said to me, enough from you. Don't say another word to me about this matter. Climb up to the top of Pisgah and look out to the west, north, and south, and east. Look with your eyes, but you will not go across this Jordan or Jordan. However, commission Yahashua, encourage him and strengthen him, for he will lead this people across and enable them to inherit the land that you will see. So we stayed in the valley across from Beit Peor. Fascinating that he keeps using third person rather than first person. Chapter 4. Now, Israel, he said, now, Israel, listen to all the laws and rulings I am teaching you in order to follow them so that you will live. Then you will go in and take possession of the land that Jehovah, the Elohim of your fathers, is giving you in order to obey the commands of Jehovah, your Elohim, which I am giving you. Do not add, and we highlighted that. Do not add to what I am saying, and do not subtract from it. Very important that even though we make commentary, our commentary does not add to what the Torah says. Let the people see what it says, and the Ruach HaKodesh can minister to the people concerning what they are hearing. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word. You saw with your own eyes what Jehovah did at Baal Peor. That was about the situation of the Midianite women, that Jehovah destroyed from among you all the men who followed Baal Peor. But you who stuck with Jehovah, your Elohim, are still alive today, every one of you. Look, I have taught you laws and rulings, just as Jehovah, my Elohim, ordered me. So when you see that look and that listen, it's a command. He's telling them to pay attention and do it, so that that Jehovah ordered him, so that you can behave accordingly in the land where you are going in order to take possession of it. There's no doubt they're going in there this time and take the land. Therefore, observe them and follow them. Follow all these rules, for then all peoples will see you as having wisdom and understanding. You see the importance of believers acting on what they believe, they say they believe, and having an attitude and a behavior that will make other people say, what is it about? There's something about you, and I would like to know what it is. And then we get a chance to witness concerning what they see. When of all these laws, they will say, this great nation is surely a wise and understanding people. For what great nation is there that has Elohim as close to them as Jehovah our Elohim is? Whenever we call on him, remember the Shekinah glory is coming right down to the tabernacle over the mercy seat. What great nation is there that has laws and rulings as just as this Torah, which I am setting before you today? So this is helping us understand what it is we are supposed to do. Only, he says in verse 9, be careful and watch yourselves diligently as long as you live, so that you won't forget what you saw with your own eyes. Now remember, this generation is different than the ones who saw all these miracles that were done in Egypt. Other than Yahshua and Caleb and Moshe and Aharon and a few others, the other ones had died out. But he's telling them, you still saw miracles. You saw enough miracles to understand who Jehovah is. He says, so that these things won't vanish from your hearts, rather make them known to your children and grandchildren. So that means you're going to teach these words. Moshe is going to get into that. By teaching the children, it forces us to look at what we're saying and how we're supposed to behave. None of that foolishness of do what I say and not what I do. That's ignorance. Verse 10. The day you stood before Jehovah your Elohim at Horeb, which is Mount Sinai, when Jehovah said to me, gather the people to me, and I will make them hear my very words, so that they will learn to hold me in awe as long as they live on earth, and so that they will teach their children. You approached and stood at the foot of the mountain, and the mountain blazed with fire at the heart of heaven, with darkness, clouds, and thick mist. Then Jehovah spoke to you out of the fire, You heard the sound of words, but saw no shape. There was only a voice. So they heard the voice of Jehovah. He proclaimed his covenant to you, which he ordered you to obey, the 10 words. So they heard these words, and he wrote them on 2 stone tablets. At that time, verse 14, Jehovah ordered me to teach you laws and rulings so that you would live by them in the land you are entering in order to take possession of it. So you're going to get all these people out of that land, because now this land becomes holy land, set apart land specifically for you as a people, and for those that will join with you in peace as believers in Jehovah. Verse 15, therefore watch out for yourselves, since you did not see a shape of any kind on the day Jehovah spoke to you in Horeb from the fire. Do not become corrupt and make yourselves carved image having the shape of any figure. Very important for us to understand, because what has come to what we call Christians of today is statues and pictures and everything else that we were told, don't become corrupt, don't do that. Think Jehovah, not just what we call Saint Matthew, Saint Mark, Saint John. No, they are what? Just like us, disciples of your followers of Yeshua, and the important thing Yeshua always pointed to was Jehovah, the Father. So any figure, not a representation of a human being, male or female. So get away from that and saying that these things represent. That's what we were told that we're supposed to do. He says, or a representation of any animal on earth, or a representation of any bird that flies in the air, or a representation of anything that creeps along on the ground, or a representation of any fish in the water below the shoreline. For the same reason, verse 19, do not look up at the sky, at the sun, the moon, the stars, and everything in the sky, and be drawn away to worship and serve them. They are part of creation. You worship Jehovah. Jehovah, your Elohim, has allotted these to all the peoples under the entire sky. So now everybody can see the wonder. This is what Paul is talking about in Romans chapter 1. Man is without excuse. Everyone can see the wonders of the creation. So we are without excuse. But the children of God, of Jehovah, are supposed to be teachers and examples for the people of what life should be like as a child of Jehovah. We go on to verse 20. No, you, Jehovah, no, you, talking to the children of Israel, Jehovah has taken and brought out of the smelting furnace out of Egypt to be a people of inheritance for him, as you are today. So once again, we say that the people are inheritance of Jehovah, but the land is the inheritance of the people. Verse 21. But Jehovah was angry with me on account of you and swore that I would not cross the Jordan and go into that good land, which Jehovah your Elohim is giving you to inherit. See, the people inherit the land. Rather, I must die in this land and not cross the Jordan, but you are to cross and take possession of that good land. Watch out for yourselves, verse 23, so that you won't forget the covenant of Jehovah your Elohim, which he made with you, and make yourself a carved image, a representation of anything forbidden to you by Jehovah your Elohim. All the men, all other peoples were worshiping these shrines and statues and things like that as imitations of or representations of God. Jehovah says, now you're going to come and teach them the real deal. But don't fall for what they're doing, or don't even concern yourself with what they're doing. Concern yourself with what I have instructed you to do. For Jehovah your Elohim is a consuming fire, a jealous Elohim. When you have had children and grandchildren, lived a long time in the land, become corrupt, and made a carved image, a representation of something, and thus done what is evil in the sight of Jehovah your Elohim, and provoked him. Moshe says, and we highlight, I call on the sky and the earth, the heavens and the earth, to witness against you today that you will quickly disappear from the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. So he's telling them, if you don't obey these things that Jehovah has set before you, just because you are his inheritance, this particular people that he has chosen, he says, you will not prolong your days there, but will be completely destroyed. Jehovah will scatter you among the peoples and among the nations to which Jehovah will lead you away. You will be left few in number. There you will serve gods which are the product of human hands, made of wood and stone, which can't see, hear, eat, or smell. However, from there you will seek Jehovah your Elohim. So see, there is going to be a change. There is a change in believers who believe in Jehovah, but don't understand what is going on. Because in that trust that Jehovah will respond in some point, because we can't hear him because we're so full of our own pain. We can't hear. He said, but there will come a time when you will seek Jehovah your Elohim. He's already put that in you. And you will find him if you search after him with all your heart and being. And we learned about that in Hebrews, even more of this explanation. That you must believe that he is, and he is a rewarder of those who search for him. So even as our ancestors were taken and brought to a strange land, which is in the word, that can happen at a certain time, at a certain point, you will change. That's in the DNA. And you will change and seek Jehovah. And that's what us as believers in Yeshua, our Messiah, we have done. So we said, no, there's something as perverted as it has been presented to us. Remember where the origin is. The origin is among us as people. But because we did all these things Jehovah told us not to do, he said this is what was going to happen. So this is heartening. It heartens us because now we can realize, wait a minute, let me go back and study this myself. Not this watered down, messed up system that Europe has given us. But what did our ancestors understand that caused the situation of what? Being scattered to transpire. We go on. Verse 30. He says, in your distress. Now Moses is prophesying that this is going to happen. He says, in your distress. When all these things have come upon you, in the Aharit Hayamim, or the end time, in future times or end times, you will return to Jehovah your Elohim and listen to what he says. For Jehovah your Elohim is a merciful Elohim. He will not fail you, destroy you. Everything that happened was not to destroy, but to teach, or forget the covenant with your ancestors, which he swore to them. Indeed, inquire about the past before you were born, since the day Elohim created human beings on the earth, Go back to Genesis. That's why this word is important. We go back to Genesis. I don't care what anybody says about this Bible. For us as believers, in us is the DNA to understand this. And we have, as believers in Yeshua, we have the Ruach HaKodesh who will explain these things to us as we inquire about everything that has transpired. Because that's why Moshe took and wrote Genesis, Bereshit in Hebrew. That's why that was written. So that we could go back and look at that and find out what is it that caused us to be in such a bad situation. Then we go on. From one end of heaven to the other. Has there ever been anything as wonderful as this? Now he's praising Jehovah one more time. Has anyone heard anything like it? Did any other people ever hear the voice of Elohim speaking out of a fire, as you have heard, and stay alive? Or has Elohim ever tried to go and take for himself a nation from the very bowels of another nation by means of ordeals, signs, wonders, war, a mighty hand, an outstretched arm, and great terrors? Like all that Jehovah your Elohim did for you in Egypt before your very own eyes. Most of these people were not there. So Moshe is explaining to them, giving them a mental picture, giving us a mental picture of what causes us to stray away from Jehovah and how do we get back. He goes on, this was shown to you so that you would know that Jehovah is Elohim. He is God, and there is no other beside him. From heaven, he calls you to hear his voice in order to instruct you. And on earth, he calls you to see his great fire. And you heard his very words coming out from the fire. We can all take heart in that. We can all, as believers in Yeshua, understand that we were called to understand this information, brought out of the darkness of this world into the marvelous light of Torah and this word. Because he loved your ancestors, chose their descendants after them, and brought you out of Egypt with his presence and great power, in order to drive out ahead of you nations greater and stronger than you. There's nothing special about us other than he chose us so that he could bring you in and give you their land as an inheritance, as is the case today. So just as that is the case, then read the scriptures. We're going back to the land. Know today and establish it in your heart that Jehovah is Elohim in heaven above and on earth below. There is no other. Let's go on. Verse 40. Therefore, you are to keep his laws and mitzvah, or his commands, which I am giving you today, so that it will go well with you and with your children after you, so that you will prolong your days in the land Jehovah, your Elohim, is giving you forever. The land belongs to the believers forever. Then Moshe separated 3 cities on the east side of the Jordan for the sun. So now it's funny, he didn't say I, but he said, the scribes are saying, who are writing this down, Moshe separated 3 cities on the east side of the Jordan toward the sunrise, to which a killer might flee, that is, someone who kills by mistake a person whom he did not previously hate, and upon fleeing to one of these cities might live there, cities of refuge. The cities were Betzer in the desert, in the flat land for the Reubenites, Ramoth in Gilead for the Gadites, and Golan in Bashan for the children of Manasseh. Verse 44, this is the Torah which Moshe placed before the people of Israel. Now he's going to get into it one more time. These are the instructions, laws, and rulings which Moshe presented to the people of Israel after they had come out of Egypt, beyond the Jordan River, in the valley across from Beit Peor, in the land of Sihon, which they had taken, king of the Amorites, who lived at Heshbon, whom Moshe and the people of Israel defeated. when they came out of Egypt, and they took possession of his land and the land of Og, king of Bashan, the two kings of the Amorites, who were beyond the Jordan toward the sunrise, meaning in the east, from Aroah, on the edge of the Arnon Valley to Mount Sion, that is Mount Hermon, with all the Arabah beyond the Jordan eastward, all the way to the Dead Sea at the foot of the slopes of Pisgah. Now, I showed you on a map what that looks like. Now we're going to get into chapter 5. Then Moshe called to all Israel and said to them, listen, once again, this is like that Hebrew word Shema. Do it with the intent on obeying. And the people are saying, we're going to listen and do what you say, Moses. He goes on. Listen, Israel, to the laws and rulings which I am announcing in your hearing today, so that you will learn them and take care to obey them. Jehovah, our Elohim, made a covenant with us at Horeb, Mount Sinai. Jehovah did not make this covenant with our fathers, but with us. So now this is a covenant he made with you when you saw those signs at Mount Sinai, with us who are all of us here alive today. Jehovah spoke with you face to face from the fire on the mountain. At that time, I stood between Jehovah and you in order to tell you what Jehovah was saying. He's paraphrasing this, but this is how it happened. Because on account of the fire, you were afraid and wouldn't go up onto the mountain. Moshe said, or Jehovah said, first command, I am Jehovah, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt where you lived as slaves. I am Jehovah, your Elohim. That's part of the first commandment. You are to have no other gods before me. You are not to make for yourself the carved image of any kind of representation of anything in heaven above, on the earth beneath, or in the water below the shoreline. These are the understanding of the 10 words. You are not to bow down to them or serve them. For I, Jehovah, your Elohim, am a jealous Elohim, punishing the children for the sins of the parents. We learn what he meant by that. In other words, when you disobey, your children are going to receive from you what? Lies and perversion. And they will grow to live that, because that's what you have demonstrated. Also the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. But he said each one is still responsible for doing what is right, but displaying grace to the 1,000th generation. Now, 4 generations, but it's 1,000 generations when you do what the Torah says to do, of those who love me and obey my commands. We go on. You are not to misuse the name of Jehovah, your Elohim, because Jehovah will not leave unpunished someone who misuses his name. So he's telling them, well, they don't. In this country, many times we do. Observe the day of Shabbat to set it apart as holy, as Jehovah, your Elohim, ordered you to do. We have to highlight that because in this nation, they don't even know. Most people don't even know when is the Sabbath. And since we're following after some crazy stuff invented by man, the church, as we say, the Catholic Church, since you're following that, then you don't know what's going on. You have 6 days to labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Shabbat for Jehovah, your Elohim. 7th day, not the first day. You can't make up your own day. This is what Jehovah, the Creator, is telling us, and he told us through the 10 Commandments. Keep the Sabbath day holy. On it, you are not to do any kind of work. Not you, your son, your daughter, not your male or female slave, not your ox, your donkey, or your other livestock, and not the foreigner staying with you inside the gates to your property. You can't tell the person that you go in there and work in the store because I can't work today because it's Shabbat. No, you're supposed to be an example. Store closed. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and Jehovah your Elohim brought you out from there with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, Jehovah your Elohim has ordered you to keep the day of Shabbat. 5, honor your father and mother as Jehovah your Elohim ordered you to do, so that you will live long and have things go well with you in the land Jehovah your Elohim is giving you. 6, do not murder. 7, do not commit adultery. 8, do not steal. 9, do not give false evidence against your neighbor. And 10, do not covet your neighbor's wife, your neighbor's house, his field, his male or female slave, his ox, his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. So he's letting you know there that lust for something that is not yours causes friction between people. So don't do that. Don't covet or have an insatiable desire for someone else's stuff. There's plenty for everybody. Verse 19. These words Jehovah spoke to your entire gathering at the mountain from fire, cloud, and a thick mist in a loud voice. It ceased. But he wrote them on 2 stone tablets, which he gave me. When you heard the voice coming out of the darkness, as the mountain blazed with fire, you came to me, all the heads of your tribes and your leaders, and said, Here, Jehovah our Elohim has shown us his glory and his greatness. We have heard his voice coming from the fire, and we have seen today that Elohim does speak with human beings, and they stay alive. Because no one had heard the voice or been in his presence other than death. But why should we keep risking death? They said, we ain't ready for that. This great fire will consume us. If we hear the voice of Jehovah our Elohim anymore, we will die. For who is there of all humanity that has heard the voice of the living Elohim speaking from the fire as we have, and stayed alive? You go near and hear everything Jehovah our Elohim says. Then you will tell us everything Jehovah our Elohim says to you, and we will listen to it, do it. That's the whole concept of hear, shema. Hear with the intent to do it. And by doing it, you'll understand the value of what you're doing. If you never do it, if you keep putting it off, then you don't get the value of what you say you believe. Jehovah heard, Moshe says, Jehovah heard what you were saying when you spoke to me. And Jehovah said to me, I have heard what this people has said when speaking to you. And everything they have said is good. In other words, we will listen and we will do it. That's good. Then Moshe says, oh, how I wish their hearts would stay like this always, that they would fear me, says Jehovah, and obey all my mitzvah, my command, so that it would go well with them and their children forever. Go, tell them to return to their tents, but you stand here by me, and I will tell you all the commands, laws, and rulings which you are to teach them, so that they can obey them in the land I am giving them as their possession. So Moshe was told, you stay here. What they're saying is true. They're not ready for it. But since they said we will listen and we will, then they will understand what you're teaching them. That is good. We go on. Verse 29. Therefore, you ought to be careful to do as Jehovah your Elohim has ordered you. You are not to deviate either. You are not to deviate either to the right or the left, and we highlighted that. We highlighted that because people want to twist the word, and they can do it because we're not listening, we're not studying the word, and we don't know it. He says you are to follow the entire way, the whole Torah, which Jehovah your Elohim has ordered you, so that you will live. Things will go well with you, and you will live long in the land you are about to possess. Now we go to chapter 6. So you see that Moshe is laying this out to them, and he's repeating things that he feels are very important for them to remember and understand. He says, now, this is the command, the laws, and the rulings which Jehovah your Elohim ordered me to teach you for you to obey in the land you are crossing over to possess, so that you will fear Jehovah your Elohim and observe all his regulations and command, mitzvot, that I am giving you. You, your child, and your grandson. So see, you're going to be teaching others, and as you teach, you learn, as long as you live, so that you will have long life. Therefore, listen, Shema, hear with the intent of being obedient, Israel, and take care to obey, so that things will go well with you, and so that you will increase greatly, as Jehovah, the Elohim of your ancestors, promised you by giving you a land flowing with milk and honey. Then he goes into verse 4 of chapter 6, which is called Shema. Shema Yisrael, Jehovah Eloheinu, Jehovah Ehad. That is Hebrew for hear, Israel, Jehovah our Elohim, Jehovah is one. And you ought to love Jehovah your Elohim with all your heart, all your being, and all your resources. These words, which I am ordering you today. Now, this is spoken by the children of Israel 3 times a day, minimum every day, morning, noon, and evening. These words which I am ordering you today ought to be on your heart, and you ought to teach them carefully to your children. Once again, in this process, you're going to be learning and more as well. You will talk about them when you sit at home, when you are traveling on the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. Tie them on your hand as a sign. Put them at the front of a head, forehead, and write them on the door frames of your house and on your gates, the mezuzah. So then we go on. When Jehovah your Elohim has brought you into the land he swore to your ancestors, Abram, Yishak, and Yaakov, that he would give you, cities great and prosperous, which you didn't build, houses full of all sorts of good things, which you didn't fill, water cisterns dug out, which you didn't dig, vineyards and olive trees didn't plant, and you have eaten your fill. Then be careful. When the promise comes, be careful not to forget Jehovah, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, where you lived as slaves. When you were humble, don't get big-headed, stay humble. You ought to fear Jehovah your Elohim, serve him, and swear by his name. Make vows only in his name. You are not to follow other gods, chosen from the gods of the peoples around you, because Jehovah your Elohim, who is here with you, is a jealous Elohim. If you do, the anger of Jehovah your Elohim will flare up against you, and he will destroy you from the face of the earth. Do not put Jehovah your Elohim to the test, as you tested him at Massah, the well of water. Observe diligently the command of Jehovah your Elohim and his instructions. That's what the Torah is. It's Jehovah's instructions to us as children, as his children, and laws which he has given you. You ought to do what is right and good in the sight of Jehovah. You go back and look at the commands, look at what he tells us is what we're supposed to do, and do that, because that is what Jehovah wants you to do. Not change something because you want to be friends with somebody who doesn't want to do it. No, stay the course so that things will go well with you and you will enter and possess the good land Jehovah swore to your ancestors, expelling all your enemies ahead of you, as Jehovah said. Someday your child will ask you, what is the meaning of the instructions, laws, and rulings which Jehovah, our Elohim, has laid down for you? So as you teach the children, they will ask questions. And in asking questions, you will have to search for answers. And as you're searching for answers, you will go back to the word to find out, or to someone who is more knowledgeable of the word than you to find out what do they think about these words. We have the Ruach HaKodesh. So when all else fails, we can go to the Ruach HaKodesh in prayer and try to understand what the word is telling us we are to do. We go on. Then you will tell your child, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. Now the whole ceremony around Pesach, this is what they're telling the children concerning what it is they are doing at the Passover celebration. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and Jehovah brought us out of Egypt with a strong hand. Verse 23. I'm sorry, verse 22. Jehovah worked great and terrible signs and wonders against Egypt, Pharaoh, and all his household before our very eyes. He brought us out from there in order to bring us to the land he had sworn to our ancestors that he would give us. Jehovah ordered us to observe all these laws. So to fear Jehovah our Elohim, always for our own good, so that he might keep us alive. Everything he tells us is for our own good. As Moshe said, keep us alive as we are today. It will be righteous for us if we are careful to obey these commands before Jehovah our Elohim, just as he ordered us to do. Doing what Jehovah has told us to do is good for us. He is the creator of all things. He knows what's best. He is, as Moshe says, he's a good God. So when he tells us to do something, it's for our benefit that we do it. Now we're going to conclude as we end in chapter 7. Jehovah your Elohim is going to bring you into the land you will enter in order to take possession of it. And he will expel many nations ahead of you, the Hittites, Girgasites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, 7 nations bigger and stronger than you. When he does this, when Jehovah your Elohim hands them over ahead of you and you defeat them, you are to destroy them completely. Do not make any covenant with them. Judgment has been rendered. You're going to be carrying out acts of judgment. Show them no mercy. Don't intermarry with them. Don't give your daughter to his son, and don't take his daughter for your son. And we're going to conclude with the last 6 verses. For he will turn your children away from following me. In other words, if you do that, it will turn your children away from following me in order to serve other gods. They had seen that exactly take place at Baal Peor. So they were understanding exactly what was being said here. If this happens, the anger of Jehovah will flare up against you. He's reminding them. And he will quickly destroy you. No, treat them this way. Break down their altars. Smash their standing stones to pieces. Cut down their sacred poles and burn up their carved images completely. For you are a people set apart as holy for Jehovah your Elohim. Jehovah your Elohim has chosen you out of all the peoples on the face of the earth to be his own unique treasure. The reason you're participating, trying to learn even more, shows you that you are one of these people that Jehovah has chosen. He has chosen you to take this information to live for others and to teach others this information. Jehovah didn't set his heart on you or choose you because you numbered more than any other people. On the contrary, you were the fewest of all people. You were slaves. We were slaves to sin. Rather, it was because Jehovah loved you and because he wanted to keep the oath which he had sworn to your ancestors, that Jehovah brought you out with a strong hand and redeemed you from a life of slavery under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. From this, you can know that Jehovah your Elohim is indeed Elohim, the faithful Elohim who keeps his covenant and extends grace to those who love him and observe his mitzvah or his commandments to 1,000 generations. And Moses is repeating again, but he repays those who hate him to their face and destroy. The day of judgment is coming. Whether people want to recognize it or not is not going to stop it from happening because Jehovah said it's going to happen. He will now be slow to deal with someone who hates. He will not be slow to deal with someone who hates him. He will repay him to his face. Depart from me. Therefore, you are to keep the command, laws, and rulings which I am giving you today and obey them. So there is going to be a day of judgment. Doesn't matter what this world system tries to teach, what your neighbor tries to teach, anything else. You're supposed to stand on the word. The more we study the word, the more we'll understand what we're supposed to do. The more we understand what we're supposed to do, we've already been empowered to do it. So it doesn't make any difference what others are doing. We have to live this life because he has chosen us to be his own unique treasure. Verse 6, his own unique treasure. Yeshua says we were found in him before the foundation of this world. So because we were in him, he has now given us the Ruach HaKodesh to follow as his disciples in what he has taught us to do. And so we have concluded our lesson. I know my time is up. Let's give the priestly blessing, and then we will end for the day. From Numbers chapter 6, verses 24 through 26. May Jehovah bless you and keep you. May Jehovah make his face shine on you and show you his favor. May Jehovah lift up his face towards you and give you peace. Well, let's get out of this shared screen. And I want to thank you all so much for joining me. How did we do? We made it by 3 minutes over, but we enjoyed it. I have loved this lesson as much as I love any of the other ones, but this is a powerful lesson. We want to take it in, allow the Holy Spirit to minister to our spirits. And I will see you on Wednesday night for our Wednesday night Bible study, Romans chapter 6. Shalom, everyone.